Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Power of the Pivot. My name is Allie Benham. I'm the marketing manager here at Women in Toys Licensing and Entertainment. I'll be your moderator. This is my first moderation of a Women in Toys webinar, so thank you for joining me. For those of you who don't know the rest of our staff, I'd also like to virtually introduce you to Sandy LaBianca, who is our operations manager on the line and is here to help in case anything goes awry today. Right now, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Dr. Cheryl Robinson. Cheryl is a regular contributor to Forbes Women and has been helping women pivot in their careers with a focus on mindset. Today, Cheryl will dive into the power of the pivot, and we're going to learn about building self-confidence, taking risks, becoming a SuperConnector, and how that can help you pivot in your career. So before I hand it over to Cheryl, just a couple housekeeping items to cover about this presentation and the GoToWebinar platform. First, WIT webinars are an exclusive benefit to WIT members and are sponsored by the Nancy's Weirs Empowerment Fund. Today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session, and you'll have access to it along with all previous webinar recordings in the resource section on the WIT website. Next, we'd love to hear from you today during today's presentation. If you have a question or would like to share a tip about making a pivot or a pivot that you've made in your life, you can type it into the questions window of the GoToWebinar console on the right-hand side of your screen. This webinar will run about an hour. We'll save the last 15 minutes for Q&A. And last, we'd like to encourage you to share your thoughts about today's webinar with your social networks using the hashtag Women in Toys. So without further ado, I will turn it over and help me welcome Dr. Cheryl Robinson.
Hi, thank you, Allie, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Before I start, I just want to say how awesome WIT is. I was introduced to the organization at the 2019 Wonder Woman Awards, and since then, I've just became a huge fan. So I'm really excited to be on this webinar with you and share how you can successfully pivot in your career. Today we're going to go over what it actually means to pivot, the different types of pivoting, and then the 3 core themes / trends within pivoting that have helped others successfully pivot in their careers. And then we're going to wrap it up with a Q&A. What does pivoting mean? I would love for you to share with me currently, in this moment, what do you know about pivoting? What does pivoting mean to you? So if you could share your thoughts in the question box, that would be awesome. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to share with me.
All right, we're getting some answers, Cheryl. Okay. So Danielle says it's to redirect your workflow.
100%.
Alexa says a change in direction.
Yep.
Same from Christina, changing direction in thought or action. Kim says a major change in your career. Janice is saying being agile to look at new opportunities or new ways to explore different paths. And we have a couple others, a lot about changing direction, a lot of changing direction.
Well, all of you are 100% correct. Pivoting, the general definition is going from point A to point B. And a lot of times people associate pivoting with basketball. The player gets the ball, they plant their one foot, they pivot around to be able to pass the ball off to another player. Today, though, there's 2 types of pivots that I would like to talk about. One is you have your personal pivot. You get married, get divorced, have kids, go back to school, move to a different state. That's all personal pivot. And then the second type of pivoting that I focus on is career pivots. And there are 5 different types of pivoting within your career. The first one is you get promoted within the company that you've been with for, say, 20 years. You start off as an assistant, go to mid-management, executive, president, CEO. That's pivoting type number 1. Number 2 is you switch companies completely. Maybe you're working at Hasbro, now you pivot or a transition, and I use pivot and transition, one and the same, over to Warner Brothers. That's type number 2. Number 3 is when you change industries completely. Maybe you were working in fashion and now you work in licensing. The 4th type of pivot is where you decide, I have had enough with working for someone else. It is time for me to start my own company. And you go off and you start. That's pivot number 4. Pivot number 5, which unfortunately a lot of people are experiencing in this crazy world right now, is being laid off, companies going bankrupt, or departments being completely shut down. Today, I really want to focus heavily on career pivots and how within those 5 types of pivoting that you can do to successfully transition over to your next chapter. Here is one of the famous clips from Friends, which hopefully all of you, recognize and associate with.
Here we go, pivot, pivot, shut up.
So that is definitely pivoting, but that is not successfully pivoting. Today, I am going to take you through of how to successfully pivot. So how did I decide to focus my career now on the research of pivoting? It all happened almost 3 years ago when I met the editor at Forbes. And when she decided to bring me on as a contributor and to start my own column, she said to me, "What are you the expert in?" And that made me reflect back on my career. I have 15 years of experience in sports entertainment. I've worked with professional athletes. I've managed professional athletes. I've worked in Hollywood for a couple of years, in the film industry. I've been involved in the 2014 New York, New Jersey Super Bowl. I've started 2 companies. I've taught at the college level for 5 years. And through all of that, I said, well, what am I good at? And I said, I'm really good at failing forward. When I get knocked down or a project doesn't go the way I thought it was going to go, I am great at picking myself back up and saying, okay, what's plan B? What's plan C? She said to me, well, you have to be a little bit more positive. And I said, okay, I'm thinking, what does failing forward actually mean? And at that period of my time when I met the editor at Forbes, I had just completed 2 successful conferences through my companies, and I wasn't feeling it though. I had a heart-to-heart with myself saying, is this really what you want to do with the rest of your life? And it was a hard no. I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. And in order to do that, you have to write. So I made a commitment to myself that I was going to focus on my writing. And 3 months later, I met the editor. And as I'm thinking about all the different journeys I've been on, failing forward is really just pivoting, because you're picking yourself up, you're going from point A to point B to point C. And this is where the pivoting or my pivoting journey occurred. So I was able now to interview successful individuals and hear their story of how they were able to pivot within their career to get to where they are today. I've interviewed over 200 individuals. I have over 160 articles published. And I've also just recently become a doctorate of organizational leadership. And my dissertation was focused on pivoting. So I even got to dive deeper into that research. And between the articles and my research, I came up with trends, with common themes of what all these individuals have experienced. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. Okay. Core theme number 1, self-confidence. It's easy to say, oh, you have to build up your self-confidence, but how do you build up that self-confidence? And one is when you're experiencing a transition, which again, a lot of us are during this time, you tend to feel a loss of identity. I had interviewed an assistant to a mega musician, and she was with her for 6 years. And when she decided that this wasn't the career path she wanted, she decided to start her own company. But with that, before she could fully transition over to being the CEO, founder of her company, she felt the loss of identity. And from that loss of identity, because everyone associated her with this celebrity, she had to say to herself, well, how do I break away? How do I create a brand for myself? And she actually took about 6 months to actually fully reflect on who she was with the celebrity and who she wanted to be. And through that reflection, and she did a series of workshops and she read a lot of self-help books. Through that, saying, you know what? I am who I am. That was me then, but here is me now. And she became self-aware of what she could offer others. So through that self-confidence, one, don't get stuck on who you were back then. Even if you are starting your own company now, or if you changed industries, gradually try to shift how you're telling the story of yourself to who you actually want to be. And I went through that when, after my conferences, and I said to myself, well, who do you want to be? Because I was so attached to, oh, Cheryl works with professional athletes and Cheryl was on the Super Bowl. That's who I was. And now, as a founder, that was great, but that wasn't the founder who I wanted to be. I wanted to be known for my writing. So I made that commitment to myself. And I really had to be okay with letting go of Cheryl from the sports industry to now Cheryl, the author, Cheryl, the journalist. And I wrote down a list which comes into the self-awareness of, okay, what do I bring to the table? Not what did I bring to the table back then, but what can I currently bring to the table that would bring value to others? And the third sub-theme under self-confidence, which I absolutely love, is ego. Again, over 200 individuals I have interviewed. Every single one of them has mentioned that they've had to put themselves out there, highlight what they were great at, and let their ego shine. And I'm not saying that you have to do it in a cocky manner, but you have to have the ego. You have to have enough self-confidence in yourself to say, this is what I am capable of. This is what I can bring to the table, and this is what I can do for you. Because how many times, and you know what, I would love to open this up for the question, if people could type in their answers. How many of you, especially as women, have been told growing up that don't be selfish, you have to be selfish, not selfless, and don't highlight what you're doing? How many people have heard, put your ego aside, that's not going to get you anywhere? So if you could just, type in how many of you, just say yes, that would be awesome. And then Allie, if you could share with me, I'd appreciate it.
I'm getting multiple yeses. I've got to raise my hand in agreement. Let's see, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got a lot of yeses.
A lot of yeses. Now, one more question for everyone. How many of you, when I said you have to have ego in order to successfully pivot, felt really weird with that statement or uncomfortable with that statement?
We have one from Kristen who says, often I've been told not to seek kudos for wins or successes. And a lot of absolutelys and more hand raises and emojis, hand raises, and yes. Only one no so far.
Oh, well, you know what? That one no makes me so happy because every time I ask this question, all I hear is, yes, how can you tell me to have an ego? How can you tell me to highlight what I'm great at? And I have to be honest, I struggled with this a little bit too. So I went to Columbia and I earned a master's in sports management. And all my professors there, they were the trailblazers of the industry. And this one professor who really, he's heavily involved in the NFL. We were at a networking event, and it was a month after the 2014 Super Bowl came to an end. We're at this networking event, and someone came into our group, and I just said, "Oh, hi, I'm Cheryl. I do sports marketing." And in that moment, he literally went to me, "Stop, literally, just stop." And he goes, "You're Cheryl, and what were you just on?" And it really, it's surprising, but it took me a second. And I go, "The Super Bowl?" He goes, "Yes, you lead with what you're most proud of, because that's what's going to resonate with people. When you enthusiastically share, not to be demeaning of others or to put them down, but you're just really excited about what you're doing." He goes, "That's what people are going to remember. And those are the types of people that they want on their team. Because if you can self-market yourself, you are going to be able to market or sell any product or service, for the company." So I went, "Yeah, I am Cheryl Robinson. I just came off of the 2014 Super Bowl. Here's what I did. I was an owner liaison, so I got to work with the owners of the teams, and I helped them through Super Bowl week, leading up to it, and during day of. And the people were just so incredibly impressed and in awe that I had that opportunity to do it." So now, as I'm interviewing these individuals for my column and for my research, they all say how they self-market, and they always lead with what they are proud of. So when I'm in a networking situation, one of my top questions that I ask people to really get them to shine and be proud is I say, "What are you most proud of?" Because when you can fully share that with people, they are not going to see it as, "Who is this person?" They are going to see someone who's passionate, can speak up, and knows what they're talking about. So for all of those who answered yes to my two questions, I really, if anything from this webinar, I hope that you can start being proud of who you are, what you have accomplished, and really share that with everyone that you meet. And before I move on to core theme number 2, are there any questions around ego that anyone would like to ask?
We did just get a question in from Julie, who just is stating, when we're talking about the ego, it feels like if you are a Brit, this feels a bit harder.
Wait, I'm sorry, can you just repeat that?
Sure. Julie has written, "But if you are a Brit, this feels a bit harder."
If you're a Brit?
If you're from the UK.
Oh, from the UK. So I have interviewed people around the world, including the UK, and honestly, all of them have been able to share what they are proud of, and that's what they lead with. So again, I don't know what your experience is. I haven't lived through it. The only suggestion that I could say is just gradually, even if it's just with family and friends, just really start to just share with them what you're proud of and what you've accomplished. And then the more people that you do that with, the more natural it's going to feel for you. And it's a complete mind shift, because if you've grown up hearing and seeing a certain way, it is definitely a mind shift, because that's what you're used to. There's a great book called The Power of Habit that really helped me. And just sharing your accomplishments, it is a habit. And the more you can do it with people that you trust, the easier it's going to be. So I hope that clears that up for you. Allie, are there any other questions or comments about ego?
There are. So first of all, I wanted to say Julie responded and said, great, thank you. This is helpful. And then we have another question from Chrissy who said, what do you suggest for people who are new to what they're doing / have created, they're new to what they're doing / what they've created and don't feel they have the history to back the ego?
Yep. So I get asked this a lot, and it is okay that you don't know everything, because your past has laid that foundation for you for the value that you bring. And what you can do is when you don't understand something, you can break it down. And even when you ask people, you can say, you know, I used to do it XYZ, or here's how I did it in the past. How can we do it in moving forward, or how do you do it now? And just ask a lot of questions, because people love to answer. They love to share their advice, even if it is something that you don't necessarily know and feel awkward about. It's okay, but it's how you frame it. So it's just, hey, in the past, here's what I did. You're highlighting what you're capable of doing. And then you're asking for guidance. Well, how do you do it now? How do we move forward? And then you can even say, you know, I've done some research on this. Here's how, I don't know, X company does it. Do you want to implement it that way? So I hope that helps you a little bit in starting to see how you can reframe your accomplishments and how you can apply it to what you don't know. Anything else, Allie, or should we move on?
Chrissy says, yes, thank you. And we can go ahead and move on to the next slide.
All right, great. So core theme number 2 is risk taking. Everyone that I have interviewed has taken some form of risk. And that risk may even be to, if they got knocked down, to pick themselves up and keep going. Subtheme number 1, risk of being ostracized. A lot of people do not want to pivot or transition. How many of you are, say entry level to mid management, and then you get the promotion to become senior management? So now all those people that you were friends with, they're going to view you in a different light. That's just the reality of it. But you have to understand that you have to take that risk of being ostracized in order to move forward to where you want to be. I interviewed a professional football player, and he was on a team, and this was before the Colin Kaepernick situation occurred where everyone started kneeling. And he told me that in the city where he was playing football, a kid was murdered. And it was just so unjust to him. He created a t-shirt that, said justice for this kid and had all this stuff on it. And he said to me, I knew that this was a risk. I knew there was high probability I was going to be cut from the team, because I was going against the norm. When everyone else is in uniform, practicing, etc., I am in this t-shirt. But he said I had to, because if I didn't, I would have the risk of regret. And that leads me to subtheme number 2, the risk of regret. So many people are afraid of actually taking the chance, even thinking of the idea of pivoting, transitioning in their career, because maybe they have a family to support. And 100% I get it. Finances are a big topic. Or maybe they're going to have to move to a different state. Maybe they're going to have to learn a new skill, or maybe they're afraid of just failing. But the risk of regret for the people that I've interviewed was greater to them than actually doing it. They all say to me, if I had not tried, I would have regretted this for the rest of my life. And then developing grit. In order to put aside the idea of being ostracized, to put aside the risk of regret, you have to develop grit. It comes quicker and easier for others, but for some, it comes back to the habit. It comes back to the mindset of, you know what? I have the self-confidence, I have the skills, I have the ability. Now it's time for me to just take the leap. And a lot of the people that I've interviewed, they said developing grit came from the small wins that they experienced. And when they started to think about those small wins, it got them excited, it got them proud, and then that gave them the courage and the motivation to take that risk to pivot to where they want to be. And networking. This is the third common theme. Again, over 200 people, all of them have stressed to me networking. I know you understand what networking is. Just how many of you, so Ali, I would like to open this up again. Before I get into the 3 sub-themes, how many of you are afraid to ask your network for what you want, and it's a lot easier to ask your network for what other people want? So if you could just reply, I would appreciate it.
All right, so we're getting some answers. We've got yes and always. It's much easier to ask what others want. On behalf of others is so much easier. A couple of I ask for myself, but for the most part, the majority is yes, I ask for others.
Yeah. So for those who are confident and it's easy for you to ask for yourself, I give you a high five right now, because even this for me, I consider myself a golden networker. Networking comes very easy to me. But again, for me, I had to develop the habit of how to ask for what I need, because it's very easy to say, hey, Ali, I know someone who wants to be in licensing. Can you speak with them? That's easy for me. But to develop that habit, I just had to constantly work at it. And networking, a lot of people, when it comes to pivoting, you want to make sure that you have a positive reputation. And as the description for the webinar stated, how to become a super connector. How many of you know what being a super connector is or have heard that term before?
We have a couple of yes, I've heard the term before, but quite a few no's.
Quite a few no's. Okay. So super connector is a fairly new term. It was coined 2009, 2010. And what that means is that you have the ability, as you are interacting with other people, to connect to the pieces. So if I was speaking to Ali and she said, you know, I really wanted to be a writer in television, as she's speaking and telling me what she really wants to do, what she's doing now, I'm able to quickly go through my Rolodex in my head and say, oh, I know this person, that person, that person. And then you extend the offer of saying, hey, Ali, I know these 3 people. I'll digitally connect you, and then you can start growing your network of television writers. And super connectors know how to build meaningful relationships. They do not just go in the one-way street. What's in it for me? With them. They go in a two-way street, and they're always asking somebody about themselves. There are 2 things that people love to do: talk about themselves and give advice. So as a super connector, you're able to ask more questions about that person than that person is able to ask about you. And the reason for that is because when you get to know that person, you, in future conversations, you get to bring that up. Oh, how are your kids doing? Did she apply to Drexel? And through that, you develop the meaningful relationships. And super connectors with their relationships, it doesn't always necessarily happen overnight. Sometimes it takes 2 years to actually develop a meaningful relationship. So with that, networking and super connectors understand the value of a positive reputation. And I go back to the assistant to the celebrity. She said to me, If I gave this celebrity a 2-week notice, it wouldn't have mattered in my 6 years what I have done for her. She would remember this moment, me just giving her a 2-week notice and deserting her. And what she did was she took 6 months. She said, I will give you 6 months. I will help find your replacement. And because of that, she kept her positive reputation intact within the industry itself, because that celebrity highly recommends her for everything because of how she handled her exit and her pivot onto her next chapter. How many of you have heard of social capital?
We have kind of a torn audience on this one, half yes, half no.
Okay. So social, sure everyone's heard of resume capital. Do this project, it looks great on the resume. Do this internship, right? It looks great on the resume. Social capital, it's not about the quantity of people that are in your network, but it is the quality. It is developing those meaningful relationships and then knowing that if you called someone, they're gonna pick up the phone and help you out. So a SuperConnector understands that. Again, it goes back to building and developing those meaningful relationships. And I always, for me, how I develop social capital, I take them out for coffee, I take them out for lunch, and I always extend an offer. Hey, if you're working on a project and you need some assistance, just let me know. I'll be happy to take a look at it. I'll be happy to brainstorm with you. So SuperConnectors understand the value of social capital. And then your support system. I always tell people I have 2 separate support systems, my personal and then my career. In my personal support system, my best friend is a physical therapist. She knows nothing about my world, about starting a company, about having a column, and that's okay. She serves her purpose here. But for my professional circle, I go back to the social capital, positive reputation, and then developing those meaningful relationships with the people that are going to help me advance in my career. And I call myself a golden networker because that means I have one very, very, very strong connection in every single industry. So say for, toys, entertainment, and licensing, hey, Janice, can you help me, right? Or I call on the other people. I have a cousin who creates toys. I call him, he's in my professional circle because I know they will be able to help me get to where I want to be. And if they can't, they know someone who can. And that's how the Golden Networking SuperConnector system works. So what I would like you to do right now is if everyone could stand up for me. I'm going to move this chair. All right. For all those who did stand up, thank you. I would like you to plant your left foot on the ground. And then I would like you to take 1 turn left. Don't move your left foot. Take another turn left. Another turn and another turn. You should have done a complete circle. And I want to thank you and congratulate you because now all of you have successfully pivoted at least once. So thank you for your time. I hope that you're able to utilize how to build self-confidence, start thinking about what risks you can take in your career and how you can really start to develop those connections and be that super connector. Again, super connectors figure out how to piece together and help others. So thank you, and I am really looking forward to this Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And anyone who has a question for Dr. Cheryl Robinson, now would be the time to put it into the question box. We've got a lot of thank you and claps. A great personal example of a pivot right there. So thank you for showing us how to do it. We do have a question from Danielle. How would you encourage pivoting in an environment that is not supportive?
So one, and let me just ask a clarifying question. Do you mean at work or, at home in your personal life, not supportive?
Professionally.
Professionally. So if it is within your workspace, my advice is to start small and start coming up with a strategy of how you're going to network. And that's 100% going to mean stepping out of the comfort zone and reaching out to people in different companies and maybe even in different industries, just to build that support system around you. And maybe not necessarily that you want that they can help you advance, but they're going to be your cheerleaders in your corner, maybe a mentor. With these associations are so great at that. And I've experienced that too early on in my career, where my supervisor, no plans for me to advance. And that's when I started researching, well, what associations are out there? What networking groups can I go to? What parties can I attend? And that's where building those meaningful relationships come from, because if it's not happening at the core, you 100% have to start looking outward. And just, again, you have to have that strategy for networking. But once you're able to reach out, like LinkedIn, I tell people all the time, start with LinkedIn. Type in a position or a person's name. And even now, I'm getting way more LinkedIn coffee virtual coffee requests through LinkedIn, because people just want to expand their network. And I think that is a great way for you to start building, they call them corners. In boxing, I managed a professional boxer, and the people in his corner, they're called corners. And that's who you need. Those are the core people who are going to help you. So I hope that you can come up with a great networking strategy to really help you deal with and cope with your work environment.
Awesome. I think we touched on this a little bit just in that last answer, but Kristen has asked, what is the best way to reach out to personal or professional contacts to let them know that I'm seeking a new role and am in job search mode?
Yep. So when you start with the people that you already know, it's a little bit easier. And all you could simply say in your subject is update from, was it Crystal? Update from so-and-so. And then in the email, just say, hey, the last time we talked, I was doing XYZ. Now I am looking to pivot, looking to transition over to ABC. I would love to know your feedback, and I would love to get advice from you, guidelines from you. And that's the easiest way. That's how I do it. The email's short, simple, it states what you want, but when you ask for guidance or advice, that doesn't put pressure on the other person where they say, oh no, now this person's asking me for a job, I don't know of any job opportunities. All it's saying is, hey, I just want your advice. And again, people love to give advice. So that's the easiest way. And now with LinkedIn or people that digitally connect you to others, you can say, I'm working in this industry, I came across your profile, I'm excited to learn more about your background and how you got to where you are today. Do you mind hopping on a Zoom call, Skype call, Google Hangouts for 20 minutes? I would really appreciate it. And I've done that myself. Not all of them reply, for the ones that you don't know, not all of them reply, but even if you get 10% out of the ones, out of the requests that you send out, you're in a really good position. And then you always follow up with, by any chance you have anyone in your network that would be willing to talk to me and give me advice? And then that's how you start to grow out your network.
Alexis followed up on this question as well, and I think it's really interesting. How do you make sure you're not bothering someone when you're trying to grow your network?
So do not follow up within 24 hours. If you send them the email, give it a week, maybe give it 2 weeks, and then follow up. Personally, that's not bothering someone. And if by the third email, and again, so after 2 weeks, if they don't follow up, I give it like 3 weeks, 4 weeks to do a third email. If they don't answer, I let it go. And this has happened to me where someone hasn't answered me, but then say I see them in the news or I see a post about them on Facebook. I send them an email saying, hey, great article, or I saw this project that you did. That starts the conversation again. And then I say, hey, do you have 20 minutes to talk to me? So, but it's the people who less than 24 hours you're following up and then you send them social media request, text message. Please don't do that. It's the email or the Instagram message. Even if it is text, just give it a couple of weeks and then follow up and you'll be okay.
Awesome. Switching gears a little bit, what advice would you have for someone who's been in the same position for 15, 16 years and is getting older?
So I've received this question quite a few times before too. And first I would start with, what do you bring to the table? And maybe have a bullet point, the power of odds, 3, 5, 7. Write that out for yourself, because what that's going to do is that's going to help you build that self-confidence and say what you're proud of. And then come up with another column, another page of the moments, projects that you are proud of. Take those two columns, pages, merge them together and say, now where can this be utilized? How can this be utilized? And if you want to switch industries, that's great. I think that's going to give you a lot more opportunities. If you want to stay within the same industry or within the same company, what I would do is research, talk to people and say, what are some upcoming projects, trends, and then put together a mini proposal, like a one-sheeter. If you don't know what a one-sheeter is, it is simply one sheet and it just highlights your skills, what you want to work on, what you have worked on. And what you do is you say, here's what I'm good at, here's what I've already accomplished. And then you have a section on the one page where if you, and again, I don't know what upcoming projects there are, so I'm just making it up, but say there's going to be a new Ninja Turtles out, and say you're in marketing, and you've been there for a while, but you want to transfer over to licensing or advertising, but you say, hey, I know this new Ninja Turtles is coming out. Here is what we could do, but here's what I recommend. And you put together that little proposal, and then you shop that around if you want to move up for a promotion to a different position, or if you want to go to different industries. It's a great segue into, hey, here's everything I'm good at, and here is how I'm going to bring value to your company. So that's how I would do it if you're a little bit older. I've interviewed women who are in their 70s, who've started their own companies, who they've pivoted. And it really, again, it comes down to that self-confidence and being able to take that risk and utilize your network. But I do not feel that you should, because you're a certain age, you should put a limitation on yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We've got a couple more questions before we wrap up. Okay. We'll start with, what are your thoughts on how to build your personal brand?
So personal brands. Again, it all comes down to not who you were, but who do you want to be? And there's actually a brand lens exercise that I take people through. But what the brand lens does is in the middle, right? Think of a camera. And the camera lens helps you focus on an object. For your brand lens, when you build that out, in the middle, you put an adjective of the number one thing, like who you want to be. Do you want to be inspiring? Do you want to be motivational, athletic, whatever that is? You put that in the middle. And then around that, you put all different adjectives of who you want to be, because the what can come in a million different ways, but the who is the core. So when I do the brand lens for myself, and I really focus on who do I want to be, right? I want to be a best-selling author. I don't have the what. I don't have for what book. I don't have for what industry. I have who I want to be. And then I want to be inspiring. And when I focus in on that, everything else falls into place. Because again, there are a million different paths that you can pivot to get you to where you want to be. But that brand lens, you start there. And then every project you work on, the people that you associate with, if it all aligns, like I put the brand lens up in my room, in my office, so I see it. And when I get a project through, look at the brand lens and say, well, does it check off all these boxes? And if it doesn't, I don't engage in it. That's not for me. That's going to be a waste of time. So then the more you stay true to who your brand lens is, then that's how people are going to start to, or who people are going to start to associate you as. And that's how you build the brand lens. And then it comes down to your social media platforms, the content you're putting out. But that brand lens, if you focus on who you want to be, that's the great Kickstarter for developing your personal brand.
Awesome. So we're going to start to wrap up. I'm going to read you one last question, and then I have a couple of housekeeping items. But our last question for today will be, do you have a recommendation of any additional reading or materials to help navigate how to build the confidence in one's own self-marketing?
Oh, there are so many books. Allie, would it be okay if I send a list and then you can forward that out to everyone who's registered on it?
Absolutely, we can do that. Sure.
Oh, all right. But the one book though is really The Power of Habit, and Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting. Those are the two right off the top of my head. But The Power of Habit really gets you to start thinking differently about situations. So start there, but I will send a list to Allie for her to get out. And real quick, before we do the housekeeping, I would love to hear from you. Stay connected. Up on my screen, I have my email address and my Instagram. I'm more visible on Instagram, and email, it is .co, not com. .co, that is correct. So I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on Instagram, and then who knows, maybe we could do a virtual coffee.
I love that. I love how virtual coffees and happy hours are the new norm for us. Yep. Not forever, but let's enjoy it while we can. And yep. There's my camera. So thank you, Cheryl, and everyone for your amazing participation today. I really hope that you enjoyed the presentation. It'll be available in the webinar archives within the next 48 hours or so. And we'll be sending you a link after the fact, as well as Cheryl's suggested reading materials once we get that list. Our next webinar, which is going to be focused on creating resilience and adopting the rebound mindset, will take place on Tuesday, May 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Lori Tabb is an executive coach and will explore ways to shift from a mindset of fear and anxiety to one that can leverage and create resiliency. And it will enable you to thrive as you move through this crisis and move to the other side of your own COVID rebound and beyond. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Cheryl Robinson. Everyone, please follow her on Instagram at Embrace the Pivot. Women in Toys is at Women in Toys if you're not already following us. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did it.